Hey guys.
Hello.
I'm very excited to talk to both of you, but Graham.
Yeah, but Graham.
But
Yeah, pay attention.
Sorry, no.
Pay attention to that.
I can just
You can no.
step aside. I'll just worry about it.
So, what do you want to know?
How did you get involved with Bryan and and David
I've
Shore?
known Bryan
Yeah.
since From the Earth to the Moon, which is almost 20 years ago, and he was Buzz Aldrin. And then we just stayed friends over the years. And then, you know, there was a change. There was a writing staff. The stories weren't progressing. David Shore said, meh, it's not working, so he stepped back. So Bryan and Sony approached me. And, you know, when I saw the pilot, and I never saw the CBS version.
Oh, you only...
I only saw the Amazon version. I know it's basically, it's in there, but there's the additional stuff that was shot for the Amazon version. I went, yeah, I want to do this because I loved the concept, and I thought what David and Bryan had come up with was wonderful, these great characters. And I love the idea of doing a con show. Who's zooming who, you know, all of that stuff is fun. But honestly, and close your ears, the big attraction was the cast. To get to work with Marin, and I've been a fan of The Divide, your show on...
Did we ever talk about
We talked a little bit because Tony Goldwyn was in Earth to the Moon with Bryan Cranston. He was Neil, and Bryan was Buzz.
Of the prop. Yes.
You're like the Kevin Bacon of...
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
It all comes back
coming
to
together.
Earth to the Moon. So, and Tony directed several of the best episodes of Justified. So we stayed in touch over the years. So when he said, "I'm doing this show with the Gravities," or Zalin, it was. I remember it was one of the great writers of Hollywood who I adore. You know, adore.
I found out that you were taking over on our show at WGA thing, honoring Richard with Tony there. Like me and Tony were standing there talking to some person who knew everything about everything, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't know who's going to be on my show now," and they were like, "Oh, Graham Yost." And I was like, what? And then Tony was like, Graham, Yost! And we were crazy.
Crazy.
He was just
As
nuts.
much as Tony Goldwyn
clothes
will
off.
go
It was
crazy.
the whole thing.
One of the most elegant people I know.
It's true.
Sweet guy. God, what a great director.
Very attractive.
Yeah.
A good person.
He's very
It's
nice.
the bad guy in Ghost. They pull him away. He
I
goes to the
know.
devils.
Remember when he spills a cup of coffee on himself and he's like, whoops, and he has to take his top off?
So we love our Tony Goldwyn, but that was, but it was the attraction of the cast. So Marin, Giovanni, Peter Garrity, Margo.
Yeah, worked with.
I'd heard of Margo on Justified and The Americans, and so, and you know, and then I didn't know Libe Beret, and she was wonderful. She plays Carly, and Shane Mcrae plays Taylor. It's fantastic. We have this weird sort of subset of people. We have this the true 6 degrees is an actor friend of ours in New York, Reed Birney, who just won his first Tony Award for The Humans last year. But Margo is dear friends with Reed. You're dear friends with Reed. Shane worked with Reed. I think Peter Garrity.
Peter must.
I know. Peter said, "I think I'm the only damn person who hasn't worked with Reed Birney."
that right?
And that is the worst Peter Garrity impression.
That was closer to a Margo impression.
That was Margo doing Sam Elliott.
That was Margo doing Sam Elliott.
That's good.
Anyway, so it was the cast, and then also getting to work, being able to pull in Fred Golan, who I've worked with since Boomtown, and he was a writer and the #2 on Justified for 6 years, and Michael Dinner, who directed the pilot of Justified, was our executive, director producer for. So working with them, then we were able to get Ben Cavell in, and Jennifer Kennedy was in the last couple of years of Justified, and then Sal Queiroz, who's a writer that Fred and I have been tracking for years. So we got to, and then Ian McDonald, we had to have one more Canadian, because Jennifer's Canadian, I'm Canadian.
Yeah, you have to make sure
had to have
it's
3
balanced,
Canadians.
yes.
And so we had this writer's room, so that was another big attraction, was to work with those people. So cast and writers and concept. And then do a streaming show.
Yeah.
So that's a whole new world.
Yeah, so how is that different for both of you and your different perspectives?
Well, for me, it's free 2-day shipping. So let's be honest.
All the scripts go out in 2 days.
Yeah, Amazon Prime's great.
I never been. I mean, the only show I'd ever been a regular on was The Divide, which was not a streaming show. So, I really didn't know if it would actually be something that I would experience a difference in personally. And the only thing that I can kind of guess and extrapolate from is like, I actually do think from looking at like now having I've just finished reading the last script of our season, and it's really good.
Okay.
But that
Thanks
I do.
for staying right on that and reading past where it says Julia,
I was like,
where it says the last line of Julia,
not me,
not my, not
throw it
me.
in the trash. I do. I mean, my sense of it. I don't know if this is actually true, but my sense of what that means for an actor is like the way that the pacing can happen is it can be slower at certain times. It can speed up at other times because it's actually more about how the viewer paces it for themselves as opposed to needing to tie into weekly sort of like this kind of cliffhanger or these sort of does it even exist? I guess it does on other network shows, the commercial break kind of
Well, you know, I mean,
things. There used to be those other things, but
Yeah.
that used to be that kind of structure of everything, obviously. Or like with The Divide, it was always like at the end of each week what you needed to do to keep people interested for 6 more days. You know what I mean? And this actually feels like my sense of it is right. Like it can pace its own way, and you still want to build in things like that, obviously, to keep them from changing the. Whatever you do nowadays, I guess.
Now it just starts on.
Now it just starts.
Yeah,
It starts automatically, and,
Right.
and
It's like
for us, I mean, that was something that we
But
were
that's a
told
big
is
thing, yeah.
they want that big hook at the end of every episode so that people just let that little
Right.
clock run out
Right.
and start the next
and give
episode.
7 seconds or whatever
Yeah.
to decide.
And
But
it's like, oh, where's my
Yeah.
remote? Oh God, I'm
I guess I'm still watching it.
God.
Yeah, but I mean, but I do think, kind of overall, that the pacing of the season can sort of be a little looser. Or at least that's my sense of things. Just in talking to these guys more about it. But otherwise, I think it probably, you've probably more to say about it than me. Which is why I'm taking this away.
You're taking the prop. Okay, so we've only got one pen here. It's yeah, exactly. You can go faster, you can go slower. There's not that no commercials. So I've worked on pay cable on HBO stuff where it's just you write the thing. You're not trying to break it up into act breaks, but we still break our stories in the room with act breaks in mind because it gives us a sense of structure. But we would, on an episode of Justified, you'd really try and say, okay, this is the episode where. We would still do that on Sneaky Pete. It would still be, we remember, okay, this is the episode where this happens or that happens. But because it's now completely serialized, that everything can kind of, we'll put this story on a low boil for a week or two and then bring it up. We'll won't show this character for a week and then bring him back and then we find out where he's been. And because Justified always had a very short time frame. The whole series really took place, we finally realized it took place over about 3 years in the future. That if you timed it out, you have to. It started after the story we were filming. But anyway, this one, our whole series, except for some flashbacks, takes place, or our whole season takes place over about 8, 9, 10 days, and so there's just a sense of this drive, and that was really fun. That the story, there's a momentum to it, and it'd be a little tougher if you couldn't access it when you wanted. From a premium streaming service.
The other surprise to me that I don't know what it's going to be like is, on the 13th or whatever, when people out in the world can have watched the whole show in a couple of days. That's something that I haven't experienced before.
Yeah, me neither.
Is right that normally it's like you kind of feel like, oh right, and can't wait to see what they're going to think when they're kind of people on the internet are wondering like, how is this going to resolve? And there will be some people, but I haven't experienced that yet.
Right.
Suddenly,
really
in a couple of days, somebody could kind of go,
all the information will be out there immediately.
Right, or they could skip ahead, or they could do whatever they want.
Oh, they better not.
No, that's awful. Yeah. Go skip ahead.
But my mom was like, "Do I have to watch it all at once?"
Tell her yes.
Like,
Yes.
Well, otherwise
if you love me. Well, that's the other thing. It's sort of any of the sort of
That's the pressure.
community etiquette we have about spoilers kind of goes out the window with the streaming shows. So like,
because you kind of go, well, it's your own fault.
Yeah, you got a week. We used to have a rule on Justified in the room. You had 3 days. If you hadn't seen the latest Breaking Bad, you had 3 days to catch up because otherwise we're going to start talking about it.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think that's valid. I approve of it.
Well, I was going to ask also about your friend John Landgraf. It's always talking about peak TV. and just cutting through the noise. I mean, is there anything? I guess just for both of you. I mean, is there anything that differently that an actor has to do these days, or a writer when you've got 450 shows out there and so much limited time, and people binging, etc. It's just such a different world. I mean, does it change anything about the storytelling process, for example, with writing?
The Sneaky Pete does have a live human sacrifice every other hour. We do that, which is hard to do on a streaming show, to do a live
Very hard.
sacrifice. Listen, when you bring that up, and I'll be seeing John tomorrow, and I will, as always, cry when I think of how many shows are on out there and how tough it is to get any attention. I don't know if it really changes anything. You're always just trying to do your best, and you're trying to do a show that you believe in and that you think is entertaining and compelling. So you just, hope that it connects.
I mean, this is also the thing about, right, like the landscape of television sort of taking over a little bit of the real estate that independent films used to take up, right? Where when you used to have like a little movie that you made that people spent years making, and then you kind of go, I hope anybody watches it, or I hope this matters to somebody, I hope people pay attention, and there are hundreds and hundreds of movies every year, and maybe something rises to the top at Sundance or something like that, and all you can really do, if you're setting out to make something that, is so blingy and flashy that's how it rises to the surface, I don't know that that certainly can't sustain itself, and I don't think ultimately it's very interesting, and I do think that ultimately you have to kind of get back to a place on the creative side, all of us, where we kind of go, that's really something that we can't ever predict, we can't control, and you just hope that somebody sitting out there is gonna, it's gonna mean something to them, and hopefully that will be enough ultimately, that it connects with some people, and that they buy things on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, free 2-day shipping. Again.
Well, I think what came through to me from the pilot that's available to watch, which I really enjoyed, is there is that sense of like authenticity in the storytelling and in the acting that's very appealing. That you kind of, when things aren't like that, I don't find them appealing at all. There's this, and the cast is amazing with you and Giovanni. That just organic kind of chemistry between you, and just being able to kind of see the different layers of the characters, and I'm excited to see like what's beyond Julia, like what's, because yeah.
And where she came from.
Where did she come from?
She came from Bridgeport.
Oh, okay.
No, but what happened in her past, and that was one of the fun things of the show, is just sort of figuring out all the secrets that these characters have, and they all do have there's something going on in each one of their lives. And part of it is, man, we got a great cast. Let's find something for Garrity. Let's make an episode that's focused on Otto. Let's find out more about Carly, the kid. What else does she have going on? Taylor, Shane Mcrae, this straight arrow cop. Well, not as straight as you think, and you find that out pretty early on. And so all of that fun, and of course, Margo, Audrey's character has some dark shit happening. So that was really fun to play.
Yeah.
Just speaking of Margo, because we talked about this earlier, just really quickly with Brian, but was the process of that last scene of the pilot? And I don't know if that was something
that was
before you came.
That was before me.
So that was, it was interesting to me because it's basically telling the audience that he's not maybe fooling her as much as we thought he was fooling her. But where did you feel like you needed to go with that? You don't have to tell me any spoilers.
No, you'll see that that her level of suspicion is an important part of her character, because she is a bail bondswoman. So they're always suspicious, and they've always got this radar going off. And so she has to address that radar. She has to address, and so you find out in what's the third episode, that Marius is able to spin that, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but is able to sort of put that at rest, but then there's something else that she's picking up on. What else is that? But it's also someone who's very suspicious. This becomes something where we realize that she's not perfect in that there was another thing in her life where she should have been very suspicious, and she wasn't. It's that old thing, people con people who are willing to be conned. that there is something where they suspend disbelief and they allow that person in because they want to believe. And so, as suspicious she is, she screws up in a big, bad area. And that forms a big part of the story.
It's something I think, to me is actually a really exciting kind of thread of the show, is that it's exactly that. It's that, Audrey believes herself to be very good at reading people. And so she will miss things because she believes herself to be perfect at that. She also believes that Julia is terrible at that and keeps telling Julia that. So even at moments when Julia actually is onto something, Julia now second guesses everything about herself because she's been told all her life that she's bad at reading people. So even if maybe Julia had seen something, not even just in Pete, but in anybody, she's going to kind of go, well, if I think this is happening, I'm always wrong. So, but actually, do you know what I mean? These ways that we kind of convince ourselves, tell ourselves stories about ourselves, right? So then we believe those. So it's that kind of conning our own brain in that way. And I think that's a really great thread there, that whatever we believe ourselves to be perfect at or imperfect at may not be accurate, but we kind of continue as if it is so much of the time.
And that also applies in the other story. We sort of looked at this first season as there's the New York story involving Cranston's character Vince and Eddie and all of that going on with the poker room, and then there's this the Bridgeport story, the Connecticut story, the family story. So Vince has his own blind because he thinks he is so shrewd, so on top of things, so smart, so able to spot a con, that he has his own weakness.
Guys, anything
Is that it?
else?
No, yeah, I think we're cool. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week. 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Oh, God bless you.
This
We're
is
all
the
happy
beginning.
now.
I know, it's great to see you on the first day.
It's the beginning, right? It's good, yeah.
You should see us in 2 weeks.